Could you explain how this extensionalist position, denial that there are any properties over and above classes, how that relates to your skepticism about meaning?
It relates in this way. It's not enough to warrant the skepticism, not in itself altogether, but it does relate in this way that predicates that are true of the same things still may or may not have the same meaning. So it's so sameness of meaning is a distinction that goes beyond sameness of extension, sameness of objects denoted.
I wanted to ask about properties. In the fully austere ontology, where we just have classes of 4 tuples of real numbers, well, there, properties as traditionally conceived aren't recognized, but then nor are, I suppose, tables and mountains, fuzzy, blurred objects as normally conceived, recognized. But still, I sense that you're more sympathetic to tables and mountains than you are to properties. I wonder if you would say why.
Good. Yes. One has to settle for their fuzziness, since all empirically learned terms are vague that way, on their edges at least. And we can't do without them. And the way I'm inclined to accommodate them, however, is by taking as my theoretical ontology objects that are not fuzzy. And it would mean that that any of indefinitely many distinct from one another, mutually distinct bodies, real bodies, could be identified with that table. It would make no difference in all applications of our scientific theory, but from the theoretical point of view, we would consider ourselves to be talking about one of that multitude and not all of them.
Well, as for properties, I can understand the antipathy to properties, particularly if properties are seen as related to extensions as sense to reference, using Frege's terminology, because properties would come under the scope of skepticism about meaning in that case. What about the alternative conception of properties, where properties are thought of as lying in between a Fregean sense and extension? How do you feel about admitting those to your ontology?
No, I'm against it, and my objection is again just over the principle of individuation. When what I would want would be an explanation, a clear one, of just when to say of property A and property B in that sense that they're the same property.
Right. And you're skeptical about that?
I don't know any way of doing it, yeah.
Right. Supposing the scientists were more certain that they needed properties than they were of any account they could offer you just now of the individuation conditions for properties, and so they just set that as a research project. Would that be an okay way to proceed?
Yes, it would. It would.
And it would be the way people do proceed.
Well, it would. Yes, and in order to proceed that way, of course, they would have to be thinking in terms of the particular, to me, very mysterious situations where they felt they couldn't do without them. And then that's what they'd be doing in their continuing investigation would be to try to sharpen, define some concept that would serve that purpose, and that could appropriately then be called properties. The situation could be worse still if the familiar situation of course, in theoretical physics notably, is to introduce a new term for a technical purpose, without giving any definition at all, any clear definition. The names for the elementary particles, without exception, are in that status. They're not defined. We're told a lot of things about them, enough so that one can get on. Conceivably, if there was something that might appropriately be called properties that seem to be needed in science, they might even be brought in that way, and we would learn to put up with them by mastering all the things that can usefully be said about them, even though everyone was at a loss to define them. I'd face it. It would be, of course, one always wishes for something clearer and more elegant, but nature gets in there sometimes and prevents it.
I wonder whether there'd be another point at which properties might need to come in. Those who see events as the terms in causal relations are often driven to say something a little bit more, which is that some of the properties of an event are causally efficacious, as it's said, other properties of the event not. And just to be able to say that, on the face of it, seems to be a matter of quantifying over properties.
Yes. Well, the way I handle that one is that I take the events as extensional. And in fact, I do, in general, think of a physical object as the, in the most general sense, as the content of some portion of space-time. It needn't be a continuous portion at all. It could be scattered. It could be sugar, for instance, as an object for me, is a single physical object. It's all the sugar in the world, past, present, future. Or, of course, one could equally just identify it with the portions of space-time that it takes up. That's purely a verbal difference at this point, it seems to me. I think of events as physical objects in that sense and as extensional. And then the question arises, the question that you raised. Here you have an event. Let's see. I remember Davidson had an example that brought this out. If I could, here's some sort of a contrivance that's rotating. That's right, and heating up. The heating up causes a bit of ice to melt in the immediate environment. As we say, the heating up caused that. There's the property in a broad sense. But the heating up in this case and the rotating are inseparable. So what I would say is, yes, so far as this, that although it's strange, and after strange usage, and after all, I'm not doing philosophy of ordinary language, but rather I prefer to be doing these things in the spirit of mathematicians who will bring in new symbols and new terms just in order to clarify or what they're doing or make it simpler and easier to follow. I would, as far as I can see, it would fit all the purposes of science to make the following unidiomatic departure and say that, yes, that time the spinning melted the ice. The spinning of the event, the spinning of that wheel melted the ice because the heating of the wheel and the spinning of the wheel were both what the wheel was doing, was the state of the wheel. No harm, because the fact remains that our general law that nearby heating melts ice stands, and there's no suggestion of a law that some nearby spinning melts ice.